we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for being here. We're going to get into the beans make our planet better and our future brighter. We're going to discuss some of the broader bean value propositions and, good for nutrition, good for the planet, good for sustainable livelihoods. And broadly speaking, we're not seeing a large consumption of beans and pulses across the planet, but even with the realization that there's such huge value, both for people and planet. So what we're going to want to discuss today is a little bit of, realistically, how can we continue to push that forward and really make that happen? And in some cases, you'll pick up themes that have already been discussed, both in Eve's keynote this morning, as then the panel just right prior to this. I'm Steve Savell. I work for Bush Brothers and Company. We're the Bean people, and we are a family-owned food manufacturer in East Tennessee, at the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. So I have a beautiful work location that I get to come to every day. But this is also a pretty nice spot to be hanging out with too. And we have some of our products out in the marketplace for that. Today I have the pleasure of moderating this particular group of really impressive folks, some that I've gotten to meet over the years and some that I've gotten to meet just this week or yesterday even. So I have a pleasure of doing that, but I'd like to introduce J.C. Rubiogo. I'm going to try to do better than Paul. Allison Greenhalgh, Paul. All right. Smith Hanif and Joanna Broomfield. I'm going to do all these things. But before we start, I would like to let these folks go ahead and introduce themselves and share a little bit about their background. So, JC, I'll let you kick that off.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Hope we are still in the morning. Oh, it's good afternoon. Right, I see it's 12:02. Yeah, my name is Rubiogo Jean-Claude. I have several contexts and background. I come from smallholder farming background. When I grew up, I grew in smallholder where beans is very important. I come from Rwanda. Rwanda is a country between the East and Central Africa region. Beans is a key crop. I can say the consumption of beans goes up to 150 grams per day per capita. So we are talking about 30 to 35 kilograms per capita per year. So my mom used to be a very good farmer, managing more than 28 varieties in her farm. So I grew up with her. She knew half the varieties where to plant for poor soils, for short duration, for short cooking time. She was a breeder. So I took up from there, and then I continued my work as I became a professional from when I was young, 19. So I started working on beans. So I've been working on beans for the last 40 years, working on common beans as a researcher. For now, I lead the global bean program of the Alliance of Biodiversity International in SEAT, which has a team in Italy and a team in Africa doing bean research for investment, for better nutrition. I happen to lead the Pan-African Bean Research Alliance, which is an African-based organization, bring together the bean program of SEAT and then the national research institutions in 31 countries working on beans, and the value chain actors like most of you who are engaged in the bean value chain. So all my entire life has been about beans. I eat beans. I don't know how many times you guys eat beans. Me, I do, when I'm at home, I do 3 times a day. So that's morning, lunch, and supper. So I'm a bean person. That's my background. Beans, I'm passionate about beans, and I want to beans are contagious. I'm sure when I finish my talk, you also continue and take it from there and eat beans 3 times a day. Yeah, that's what I can say for now.
Alice.
Yeah.
I think I've done my introductions prior. So AGB, and my particular interest is food systems and the important role of health, but also nature, climate, and equity. And I'm delighted to be on the panel. So
And we're going to hit on some of that. Smitha?
Great. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Rebecca and the team at BeanCon for having me here, joining this panel, and to the USDA's leadership for teeing us up. I am Smitha Hanif. I serve as the Managing Director for Hospitality and Dining Services at Harvard University, and I also serve as the co-chair for Harvard Food Systems Initiative, touching on systems thinking. When I think of Harvard, it's like a micro city, right? It's a community, and we are comprised of students, faculty, staff, and we believe that living in a living, learning environment, community and community building through food is at the core. And a great emphasis in how we're approaching that is in diversifying our menus. And Beans has been at the heart of the solution making. We have a team, or I am blessed with a talented team of culinary chefs. Harvard chefs are always thinking about how to translate the best of research, the best of scientific evidence, and we partner very close with our School of Public Health into the menus for our campus, but also extend by way of writing about our stories and recipes, extend that to communities around the world. So as part of Harvard Food Systems Initiative, we have 3 cornerstones: education, engagement, and making it experiential. And I hope that today as a panel and through the stories that I share, we are able to connect with common stories and unique stories that celebrate beans at the center of it. Thank you.
Joanna.
Yeah, sure. My name's Joanna. I co-run an organization based in Thailand called Root the Future. Basically, our whole mission is to raise awareness. So we advocate, we educate, at the same time as entertaining as well, just to get people interested. So we want to raise awareness and get people and businesses interested in sustainability on the whole, with a focus on food and specifically plant-based food. And obviously beans plays a big part of that. So across Thailand, we run events. That includes food festivals, movie premieres, marathons, chef's tables events, campaigns, restaurant competitions, plant-based food awards. A lot of these we've done with the US Bean Council in Thailand. And we also produce documentaries, and we work a lot with social media, and we collaborate with influencers and celebrities. So basically we do anything and everything possible to raise awareness and get the information out there, at the same time as advocating for more sustainable food with a focus on plant-based food. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to jump into our conversation, and we will leave some time at the end for more questions for folks from the audience if you have some. If we spark something in the middle of a conversation, go ahead and jump in there too. That won't seem weird to anybody, I'm sure. So. But go ahead and do that. Allison, we're going to start with you, and we're going to pick up on a topic that you actually brought up in the last panel session around COP28. And you mentioned that COP28 called out food as both a solution as well as a problem or an issue that needed to be addressed. And so I want to kind of work through the discussion of what do you think the roles of beans are, especially from a health and nutrition standpoint, your specialty, and how that can be part of that solution. And then you can riff off of there too.
Okay, all right, great. And I think COP is just a recent example, isn't it, of how we're starting to recognise the important role of food, and the important role of food within health, but within climate and nature, and importantly equity as well. And as I mentioned before, kind of over 150 countries signed a declaration with intent to raise the bar on action. They're going to go home to their their countries and hopefully start to put into play some policies that are really conducive to moving the needle here. But why is food important? When it comes to health, we know that diet is the #1 risk of all-cause mortality. So it's not smoking, it's not firearms, it's food. And we forget that. And so as such, many of these reports that we talked to earlier are saying kind of the transformation of our diet is the critical factor that we need to kind of look to. And so an example, the Eat Lancet is a really important report that's kind of really outlines kind of what we should be eating, but also planetary health as well. And they're calling for the consumption of around 50 grams per day around the world. And we know in some countries they already eat more than that, but in many countries they eat way less than that. And that's for a reason. That's because, you know, beans are so important for our health. As we all know, important source of fiber and protein and micronutrients and phytonutrients, etc. So don't underestimate the power of that mighty bean, delivering us for nutrition, but also delivering for planetary health as well. And that's being called out globally consistently now. So we need to kind of really take action as a result of that.
So we have a global opportunity that you're calling out, and actually I liked one of the ways that you compared, and I don't think that any of us would think it's surprising that we'd hear that diets are so critical to health, but you did a very interesting thing there by making that comparison to other causes of mortality that we may not always put that together. So it's just a little bit of aha. It's not a hard point to understand, but I think it's really important. And so WorkComp was able to take that discussion at a global level and then have all that go back home to all those global countries. If we think about that from one level, maybe step down, JC, from a continent standpoint, and as you think to that theme of beans as a solution, you know, and you shared a little bit in your intro, but if you could also go a little deeper into how important that is to Africa, and then the work that you do through PABRA, and where that ties together.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so let's say, what is the importance of beans in Africa? Why counting on beans? Just maybe the bigger figures is that Africa grows around 7 million hectares of beans, the dry beans. That alone is around 150 million smallholder. When I talk smallholder here, we're talking about between 0.5 acre to 1 acre. So they're not that big. They're not 4,000 acres, but 150 million who grow beans annually. And then they feed around 400 million people in Africa. Probably also grow because they is exported too, but at least that's Africa. So beans is a cheap source of proteins. They don't afford meat or other animal proteins regularly, so beans comes in. A major source of what we're talking about, micronutrients as well, iron, zinc, selenium, folic acid. Potassium, several very good elements, yeah, definitely. But it's good also for the ecosystem, for their food and health diet, what you talked about. We need to shift our diet. It's also good for the ecosystem, for the planet, because beans, such a versatile crop, they intercrop with the maize, cassava, banana. And that is not just intercrop, but also it's a way to generate food system, because you don't eat cassava alone. You eat cassava with the beans. You eat maize with the beans or any other product. So that means intercrop or in rotation is for their food systems, which must be diversified. And then they have a range of varieties, definitely. You find some are growing the yellow, the small red. So they know how to do that. So, and then in that process, the majority of these 150 million, they are smallholder. Majority of them are women, almost 70%. So that means they sell, they eat in the household, they're in charge of food, they're also in charge of selling and getting incomes. So that's an equitable way to increase their livelihood too. So, but when you take to the market, because we don't have a supermarket across, there are some, but very few, you find the open market. The majority of people who buy from the women producers, they are also women traders. So that's created jobs along that value chain. So in the brief is for Africa, I think beans is both, you count on beans because of food, nutrition, affordable source of several nutrients, but also for inclusive incomes, and then health of the planet. They fix nitrogen and several other, they use less chemical, so that means less pollution. And then for us to address that, we start working to understand the market, to understand the consumer, like Javier was talking about in the other session, understanding the consumer, develop the varieties for that regard, but also the variety with the short cooking time. So we are mindful of the health of the consumer and the farmer, but at the same time, mindful of the planet. So we want to double not only the consumption, but also the production, because we still have a productivity of around maybe average 1 ton per hectare, which is still maybe again around 400 kilograms per acre. So we need to make sure that it goes higher because the demand is increasing. Right. So that's what I can say for now.
And I want to circle back to the production because you called it in your previous
missing middle.
The missing middle.
Don't forget the missing middle.
Okay, and because we talked a little bit about that, Smith, you even brought that back up before we walked on. So don't let us forget. I want to ask that question.
Can I interject?
Yes.
So, I think what you talked to, and I remember a really powerful kind of, I've heard you talk to many, many times, these women who are growing the beans, the difference it makes not only to themselves, because they're now holding back some of those beans for their own consumption, but for their children. So they're now not selling all the beans, they're holding back the beans and feeding their family. And so those children are having nutritious beans, but also the economic status of the household is improving. And so that next cohort of children are growing up with bountiful opportunities to really thrive, haven't they? Kind of both health and economically and socially. It's really, really important and powerful.
I think, again, this is something very important. Beans empower women economically, but also because I think in many contexts, the majority of people are concerned more of household food, they are women, more than men. Mm-hmm. So you can see how powerful they are, both at the food, at the household level, and economically for them to have incomes, even taking their kids to schools. Mm-hmm. So that's very, very important.
Well, and having that understanding of that global impact is not maybe as obvious in certain parts of the world. I don't know that it's something is noticeable in the United States. So hearing that story then helps kind of bring some more of these broad global kinds of impacts and positive impacts, into the discussion.
I mean, just a little bit, before you give to the other one. Again, beans are very, very good in such a way that they have a different range of products. So it's not like probably in the US or other place where you have highly industrialized farming. For the farmer in Africa, they can eat the leaves, they can eat mature pods, they can eat fresh grain, they can eat they can eat the dry ones. So you can see this range of products allow them to take care of food security at the household and nutritional security as well. But at the same time, they have a short duration and long duration. So you know how to balance your food and nutrition and household cash too.
Perfect. All right, we're going to keep going down the global, kind of the continent, country level. We're going to dig a little deeper, Smith, into a smaller community, which is the community that you're responsible for from a student standpoint. And so if we think about how you're working young people through menus and recipes and things that will bring them into, you're infusing more beans into their diet. How are we doing that, and how does that happen?
Yeah. Thank you, Steve. So a couple of things. First is we inform ourselves with some of the best scientific evidence that's out there, so that it's grounded in pretty much the menu planning or menu engineering part of it. And why is that so? When we think about food, there's so many fads and trends that come and go. And we are always thinking about our community that is global, because there are students and faculty and staff who are coming from all over the world and making Harvard home for themselves. And we want to be cognizant about, yes, trends are good, And yet, let's have a very strong core to how we are educating, informing ourselves first. So we partner with the scientists from our School of Public Health, Harvard Chan School of Public Health, Dr. Walter Willett and Dr. Frank Hugh, and I serve on the Nutrition Roundtable, wherein we think about the health aspect, the cultural aspect, the social aspect, the environmental aspect, right, with a host of practitioners from different fields. Then we say, okay, what does it mean to truly take the scientific work and break it down into formats that our cooks can understand, our chefs can understand, our managers can connect to with our students, with our community. Again, I go back to the idea of communing, right? In our community, our students, in fact, our community may be interacting with our staff, our beloved staff, like they call it, more times than in pedagogical settings, right? So it's important, those interactions and how we cascade it up, down, and laterally are important. We have a very strong strategic framework. There are 5 themes to our strategic framework. Community engagement, staff, students, faculty, how are we engaged in community? Food and agriculture, the lane that we're in, the source of it is food and agriculture, right? We buy Bush's beans, we buy, right? It's coming from all over the country and the globe. The third theme is diversity and inclusion. When we think about food and culture, we would want to celebrate cultures from around the world. And beans plays a huge role when we think about diversity and inclusion, and right, whether it is Latin American Heritage Month or Black History Month, and what is the relevance of beans, or of course the culture, but the context, it's important to us, and we do that actively with our students and our community. Operational safety, it should be safe, foods should be safe and from a consumption standpoint. And finally, because we are an institution of higher learning and we are in an environment from the law school to graduate school of education, from the divinity school to the School of Public Health, we think about what then is our role in food systems, climate change, and the environment. So those are our 5 key pillars or themes. And when our chefs and managers are translating our menus, we have 4 key priorities. So 5 breaks down to 4. Health sensitivity, cultural sensitivity, religious sensitivity, and environmental sensitivity. What we have found is communities can be interested in food, but how an individual consumer gets into that space is personal. I may be coming in because I practice Hinduism, I may be a vegetarian, and therefore, right, my entry into food could be one from any of these. Again, the bell curve, right, the middle. And what we found when we started using this as a framework from menu engineering standpoint, our chefs have found health sensitivity, cultural sensitivity, religious sensitivity, and environmental sensitivity, beans translate quite naturally into each of these 4 key priorities for every day part, whether you're talking about breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner, midnight meals, anything in between. So the multidimensionality of beans, therefore, has risen on our campus. And our students, in the latest survey that we did this academic year, have voted, 82% of our students have voted positively for the menus that we have written, right? And I'll share some of those. We consume over 100,000 pounds of beans. If we thought about ourselves as a micro community or a city, 100,000 pounds, right, 50 tons. And that is growing over the years. But the examples that Chef Martin, right, and the team has written, cannellini beans with sage and tomato passata, right? It already, I can taste it. Scented coconut kamut with kidney beans. butter beans baked in tomato dill sauce, and my personal favorite, chicken cassoulet with cannellini beans. So we translated and again bridge it, right, in ways that our community can enter into the space, enjoy it, and still keep it nutritionally dense and hearty and happy. And the final thing I will say, so 5 themes, 4 priorities, and final theme is the work that I do with Dr. Walter Willett on Harvard Food Systems Initiative. Both of us thought about, right, what does it mean for Harvard to take on this work and this initiative at this point in time? Clearly, Walter is engaged with the Eat Lancet and many other global nutrition-based work, or right, in many themes. But we felt it was important for us to break down that science here on our campus for our community first, and then in doing so, make it open source where any community, any school, K through 12 or university, a workplace or a medical institution can glean in and say, oh, that tomato sage recipe with the cannellini beans, I can make that too. Whether it's a hospital setting or a workplace setting or a Fortune 1 company, or it's translatable, it's relatable. So we have 3 pillars of education, engagement, and experiential. The experiential piece is what we continue to come back to, right? Dr. Willett eats those meals with the students, and we are talking about, this is good, we should kind of share those, those common experiences that can be pervasive, that can translate and travel around the world. And beans have been at the source of all of it. And thank you again to Bush's Beans and to everybody in this room, right? You're producing it, you're scaling up, because we need, as consumers, those volumes. And I'm one example at this point in time. But the moment we all aggregate, you can see that there is interest from youth who can build on that momentum.
So let's stick with the youth component of it. Joanna, you have a kind of a special focus also on young people, in your community. And as you think about how you believe that we can, again, get this younger generation on board so that they see beans is really critical, but also getting into maybe that sustainable food system, because I think there's a component where you've tied a lot of that together. Yeah. So it's still younger people in a different setting than what Smitha.
Yeah, I think that with sustainable sources of protein, and specifically beans, when you attach those to a cause, you have a huge opportunity to reach young people, because beans are so great for the planet, we can actually make beans mission-driven. And because it's not like, some other climate action solutions where you might be doing it once a day or once a week, we're eating 3 times a day. So you can really kind of attach that personally to young people and appeal to the younger generation's morals and missions. Everyone's sharing on social media at the moment, like what they're about, what they're passionate about. So we have a real opportunity to reach those people, and 3 times a day with a mission-driven food. And also because we're eating 3 times a day, it can become more empowering as well. And at the same time, I also think we can reach the younger generation. I think are becoming more and more interested in kind of cultural and traditional foods from their regions and their countries. And that's what we're focusing on. That's what we've been focusing on lately. And we've found that lots of the younger generation are so interested in finding out what's the most traditional and historically cultural foods from their region. And so often that comes back to beans. They're such a big part of traditional dishes in so many regions. So yeah, if we look back before this globalized food system, people were growing what made sense, what was kind of sustainable, what they could sustain in their area, what was affordable. So that's where beans seems to always come back in the traditional dishes. And specifically in Thailand, where we work, we have this other unique opportunity to reach this younger generation, not just through making beans and sustainable foods mission-driven and reaching people that way. But also, in Thailand, it's quite unique, or I think a lot of different parts of Asia as well, where most people don't actually cook at home. Like, it's very rare for people to be cooking at home. Actually, a lot of people don't even have kitchens in their condos in Bangkok, for example. So you have this opportunity to reach this younger generation through the restaurants and through the chefs and through the street food. I think the street food in Asia is such an untapped opportunity for young people. Young people who work in offices, they will eat street food every day without a doubt. Most often people will eat street food 3 times a day. So you have all these different opportunities to reach people with cultural food, to reach people with this mission-driven food at the same time as utilizing restaurants and chefs. And street food especially is, I think, a very untapped opportunity that could have such a big impact, because so many millions of people are eating street food every day. And then obviously for the younger generation, marketing and social media is such a big thing. So constantly campaigning to keep beans at the forefront of excitement, whether that's bringing excitement to the more traditional foods or dishes, or bringing excitement to the more modern uses of beans, which we've also worked on last year. So getting restaurants to get involved, get competitions, get people constantly talking about beans, and constantly bringing beans into the spotlight. And I think that's really important with the younger generation, marketing and social media. So very important. And also when we linked beans to climate change, and so the important things, I think, for the younger generation is linking beans to climate action and making them mission-driven, always bringing them to the forefront. And I think just overall making beans this thing, we want people to have FOMO if they're not eating beans. Basically, is kind of the main thing. We want everyone who's not eating beans to have FOMO.
So if there's a way to tie that back, Smith, back into the university, and then we can figure out how to connect with all of that.
Yeah, so one example I'll share is salad bar, right? We don't call it salad bar anymore. It's our greens, grains, and beans bar. That can translate as a bowl, full nutrition, right? That can translate as a breakfast. That can. Sometimes it's those shifts, right? How are we thinking about our own spaces in designing it and talking about it? We began to see students, and there are suggested assembly of those bowls, or from the greens, grains, and beans destination, of how a student or a community member can build a hearty, healthful, diverse, and yet empowers them to make a bowl that is personal to them. So it's like the golden rule, right? We are trying to connect to a diverse audience, but also give them the agency to make a meal the way that best suits them. And
okay, so y'all have hit on a lot of things around, driving that demand, through there. So I do want to circle back to both JC, you and Allison, mentioned the demand, pieces is part of, if we can create it, we still have to have the supply, for that. So what are the opportunities, in whichever one wants to jump into that? Because that's part of the food system. And so if you're systems thinking, and those are the perfect ways of thinking about that, how do we ensure that we're going to meet there at the same time, so that the demand and the supply, do connect properly?
Why don't you talk about your bean corridor? I love your bean corridor.
Oh, great.
It's an amazing example of connecting the dots through the supply chain.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Alison. Yeah, what she's talking about, in our bean research, we used to develop varieties, but we're not looking much on the consumer. So we're thinking, when you have a smallholder, they're not, as I said, a farmer of 4,000 acres. These are 0.5, 0.2 acres. So, but then to meet the market demand, you really have to aggregate them. You have to cluster them. So that when you're looking for a product, you don't have to jump left and right. I know this clustering area, I can go and look for the volume, and then I fill my lorry, and then I go, and then I pay them at a better price. So we came up with a strategy called Bean Corridor, what she's talking about. She's one of the PABRA members as well. Yeah, PABRA members. So this is looking on agroecology, of a certain agroecology, with a specific variety or varieties. So that means there is ecology adaptation, but also with the consumer in mind, knowing that, yes, if this particular variety has a demand and these farmers are able to have better production, so you have to satisfy the farmer, to incentivize them so that they can invest in the farm, definitely. They need to meet the consumer demand. So you work with the traders who know which variety, which is better traded. And that's what we, as researchers, we develop. So we base on the consumer and trader demand. We come back to the variety development, specific variety, either is a red mottle, is a yellow, is cranberry, is a dark red kidney, with a specific agroecology adaptation, better climate resilience. Farmers need a productivity with a certain agroecology. So the farmers are clustered naturally because that agroecology is for that variety. The traders know where to get it, and then they have a better price. So you build the capacity of the farmers to supply the best products. And once they supply the better products, then the trader pays them at a better price, and they incentivize. So we have demonstrated this for now closer to 10 years. Farmers go for new varieties, and they increase their genetic gain. In the past, farmers were not renewing varieties, and the climate change could beat them up. For now, when there is a better marketable variety with a good consumer demand, they are better paid. When they are better paid, they also look for a way to increase their productivity, and then the consumer meets. So it's very, very important. That's one area we address the consumer. The second one, like many other places, I don't know how much time we have, but like any other place, beans cooking time is a very expensive process. In terms of energy, in terms of time, women's time. So we have developed a variety now with a shorter cooking time. So that means we're aiming at, now we could be 20% less, but now we're going up to 30%. So that means that cooking time will be good for the consumer who has the challenge of energy. And then the number 3, we're also looking for other products you can process beans into. Because urban consumer in Africa, like many other places, they don't have a time. They want to watch Premier League, which is from the UK. They want to do everything. So in that case, you have to get a product which they also don't to spend time cooking. And that's what the street, I think, food she was talking about. They're convenient, but nutritious. Because there are so many convenient foods, but they're not nutritious. But when you do for beans, you beat all that together. So that's how, again, that comes from the consumer going back to the production. We work with the private sector to get it up. So it's a lot of very important if you want to keep this crop higher and higher.
Right.
And connecting the dots all the way through that. So less cooking time is also less fuel.
Right.
So better for the environment. But also if that's open fire cooking as well, there's a health risk to that. So again, everything's very, very interconnected. So we can't escape that. We have to always think of kind of those multi-dimensions.
The coordination Paul was talking about, that must be coordinated.
Well, and when you can find these common themes or common strings of opportunities through all of this, so the time savings for the farmer, the time savings for the production, in a food service environment. I mean, you're talking about what I would call food trucks, but certainly, those meals that are out there they're trying to produce, and if you're trying to do that for people that are working in the offices, they only have a short period of time. If you're a food manufacturer, for myself, time is certainly, critical in the whole process. So that's like one piece of that has so many benefits from it, but that wasn't even a primary part of the conversation, but it gets to be a very critical component of trying to improve all of this.
And Steve, another aspect was that we uncovered was the idea of biodiversity, right? When we want to diversify our menus, we would want to have a variety of beans. I was talking to folks from the Michigan Bean Commission yesterday, and the colleague was sharing about pink beans, and right from, this is what I like from my state, Smitha, you know, and what bean do you like? Like, I like chole, I like garbanzo beans. But the idea that there exists so many different varieties of beans, we found that to be an educational opportunity, because some beans are well known, well celebrated, right? Garbanzo and kidney bean, I think, are ranked top 2. And yet, if we want to focus on biodiversity from climate and food system standpoint, how might we educate that there are other beans, types of beans? And then again, the role of chefs and managers and teams, staff, cooks comes, right? Because we might need some educational content in how to translate that into everyday menus and consumption.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm going to be conscious of time. We have a little less than 10 minutes, so I'd like to provide the opportunity for the audience if there's any questions, and I think there's some folks that will have microphones through this. So if there are any questions, and I think we've got one over on this side.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jose Valli. I work for CT Smith Company in Pleasanton, Texas, and I had a question. You guys mentioned shorter cooking times. Shorter cooking times in my mind would mean sacrificing other traits within the bean. So you're sacrificing the testa in the seed to be able to be cooked faster. That would also result in things that would affect production. That would also result in more weather damage to those beans, which would thus make them unacceptable for commercial consumption. So where is the give and take between large-scale commercial production and something like the speaker was talking about?
JC, do you have a
Right.
perspective?
Yeah, so we haven't really looked at these different probably trait and which one do we sacrifice, but we have seen that for us, I haven't seen where it reduces the productivity. So it's not a trait which has negative correlation with the yield. So probably, maybe some, but I haven't seen that one, but it's something we can look at it. But what I know probably we should be looking at is there are people who say, well, short cooking time, probably the water goes in the grain very fast. So it may be, if you don't protect against the brookids may jump in, definitely, because usually brookids have. So look at post-harvest quality. That's another angle we can look at it. But the consumer, certainly they value short cooking time. Either you can do through genetic innovation or through processing to other products. So we need to compare and look at it very closely. Yeah.
Exactly, and a good example of that would be the BT cowpea that's been produced. How would we be able to utilize that and add that value to our farmers, for example, at a larger scale, if we can't get that seed into the United States or Europe or anything like that?
Yeah. And I know on the project that we're working on in Oxford, so Oxford University, they developed a new cultivar called Godiva, I think, which is a shorter cooking time, and I think the yields are comparable.
Yeah, even that's
Yeah.
what we found. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great question, though.
Any other questions?
They're very shy.
Yes, this is laid back. Well, Smitha went through, and I started to say something. You know, you started about the meal options. You started working through the various recipes, and here we are right before lunch at some point. And I thought that was somewhat cruel, but that's just the way that works out. So yeah, it's a relatively quite. If there's any other last points or thoughts that anybody would like to share?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts, not at scale or not at the scientific seed level, but I remember going into a farmer's market. This was in Barcelona, and there was a little shack just cooking a dozen different types of beans and keeping it ready. So any family or any consumer coming to purchase can buy it in the pound and take it home to cook faster. Again, going back to consumption, right? How can we make it available? The other part is equipment, right? The pressure, again, this is at the home scale, not industrial scale yet, but are there, as much as we are thinking about production, right? If the goal is to double consumption over a short period of time, might I add, there is one from the farmer to the market, but from the market to the consumer, some of these barriers is availability, not just in cans, but perhaps the perception of freshly prepared. Just as I go to the farmer's market to buy fresh vegetables, could I even get access to freshly cooked beans and a variety of them, biodiverse? And then second is, once I take it home, if I want to buy those dry beans, might I look at equipment innovation like your Instapots and pressure cookers and such that are, again, culturally appropriate or designed geographically appropriate, right, by food code and equipment standards, that can help with those incremental, are two ideas that just came as I was listening to this conversation.
Perfect. Joanna, do you have any other?
I just want to bring it back to sustainability a little bit and give a bit of a kind of an anecdote from Thailand, what's happening there at the moment. So obviously the urgency of climate breakdown is kind of giving us no choice but to change our food system. And as you talked about, COP28 has finally said, okay, it's part of the problem. not just that, but it's a huge part of the problem. But it also gives us this opportunity to encourage more people to eat sustainable proteins like beans. So at the moment in Thailand, this has been happening over the last 15 years, we have this crisis of air pollution. And this is 3 to 4 months of the year between January and April, May. The air pollution in northern Thailand and central Thailand becomes so catastrophically unhealthy that schools close, people can't go outside. It kind of becomes the center of media attention for 3 or 4 months of the year. And so everybody is affected by this, and everyone is affected by this firsthand. So we have this huge group of people. I mean, some people who live in northern Thailand, they do have the option to leave the city, or they do have the option to stay at home. But we also have this huge group of people who have to still go and work outside, and they have to endure this hazardous air quality. And I think on the AQI, on the global AQI, it is well above hazardous. Do not go outside. So you have this huge group of people who are not only suffering from this impacting their lives, people are actually dying. Like, a lot of people are dying from this. And we can actually, so we have this huge group of people who are very passionate, and the media is talking about this all the time. And everyone is so ready for a solution. So with the right messaging, you have millions of people who are ready to jump on board a solution. And beans can actually be part of the solution here, because the burning season is it's all maize production, predominantly maize production for animal feed. And we have millions of small farms in northern Thailand that grow this maize. So you can all bring that back to a lot of meat exports as well, but global consumption of meat is actually impacting the air quality in northern Thailand. So in simple terms, if with the right messaging, we can actually say increasing bean consumption globally, not just in Thailand, because like I said, it's export as well. We can actually clean the air. So I think that this is such an opportunity. I mean, it's not great that we've got to this point where, okay, this awful thing is happening, here's the solution. It would get better, obviously, to be preventative. But it also gives us the opportunity here to say, okay, right, we're having climate catastrophes already. We can actually link this back, and here is the solution. Hey, we can eat beans to clean the air. So I think that the more, and I know that there's more examples of this around the world, but this is just what kind of is happening in Thailand right now. Actually, in February is the middle of the burning season, so everyone's just starting to talk about it again. But this is a huge opportunity. All these different kind of scenarios and climate catastrophes that are happening around the world, as sad as it is that they're happening already, it's an opportunity to say, okay, more beans.
Perfect. Well, I think we end on something that says more beans at this point. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining me up here today. This has been awesome. I really appreciate your time and sharing. I'd like to ask the audience to give these guys a round of applause.